Good evening. I want to welcome you to our Good Friday service. Life and death stand side by side this evening as we enter into Good Friday. Tonight we stand beside the disciples at the foot of the cross. We pray for the whole world as Christ's death offers life to all people. So we gather this evening in solemn devotion, but always with the promise that the tree of the cross is indeed a tree of life. Our service will begin tonight with the whole congregation singing 2 verses of Ah, Holy Jesus. They are printed in your bulletins. After that, we are going to enter into a time of the Passion narrative. It will be read and interpreted by actors and sung by our choir throughout 7 different scenes. You are invited to participate by looking and watching and wondering wherever these folks come out of this room at. Some will enter from the backs and the sides. So I just invite you to be present and to listen as we use this space to tell the ancient story of Christ's love for us. When the Passion narrative ends this evening, we will sing the final 2 verses of Ah, Holy Jesus together, and then we will simply depart silently as we anticipate the culmination of the 3 days on Easter morning. Our gathering hymn this evening, is Our Holy Jesus, number 349, verses 1 and 2. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and I pray." And Jesus took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, James and John. And Jesus began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "My soul is deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here. Stay awake with me." And going a little farther, Jesus threw himself on the ground and he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came back to his disciples, but he found them sleeping. And Jesus said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me for 1 more hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come to the time of trial. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. Then again, he went away for the second time. And Jesus prayed. He said, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again, Jesus came, and he found his disciples sleeping, for their eyes were so heavy. So leaving them again, he went away, and then he prayed for the third time, saying the same words. And Jesus came to the disciples, and Jesus said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Now the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners." And while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and with clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. The betrayer had given them a sign saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once, Judas came up to Jesus and he said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. Now Jesus said to Judas, "Friend, do what you are here to do." And they laid hands on Jesus and they arrested him. Now suddenly one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, and he drew it, and he struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who take the sword will die by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a rebel? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then the disciples deserted him, and they fled. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. But Peter was at a distance, following as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going just inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this was going to end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days.'" And the high priest got up, and he said to Jesus, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to Caiaphas, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes, and he said, "He's blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" And they answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in Jesus' face, and they struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?" Now Peter, who was sitting outside in the courtyard, went and was visiting with a female servant. And she came up to him, and he said to him, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But Peter denied it before her, saying, "I do not know what you're talking about." But then he went out to the porch, and another female servant saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "No, this man was with Jesus the Nazarene." Again, Peter denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders kept coming up to Peter, and they said, "Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then Peter began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know the man." At that moment, the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said. "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter went out, and he wept bitterly. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him and they led him away. They handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Now when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented. And Judas brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, and he said, "I've sinned by betraying innocent blood." But they said to Judas, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, Judas departed, and he went, and he hanged himself. That same day, Herod and Pilate became friends with each other. Before this, they had been enemies. Pilate then, he called together the chief priests and the leaders and all of the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who is inciting the people. And here I have examined him in your presence and have not found this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. Indeed, he's done nothing to deserve death. I'll therefore just have him flogged, and I'm going to release him." But then they all shouted together, "Away with this fellow! Release Barabbas for us!" And Barabbas was a man who'd been put in prison for an insurrection that had taken place in the city and for murder. Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again, but the crowd kept shouting, "Crucify! Crucify! Crucify him!" A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no ground for the sentence of death. I'm going to have him flogged, and then I'm going to release him." But they kept urgently demanding with loud shouts that he had to be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate gave his verdict that the people's demand should be granted. He released the man they asked for, the one who'd been put in prison for insurrection and murder, and he handed over Jesus as they had wished. As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, He was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him, and they made him carry it behind Jesus. A great number of people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts, and they were wailing for him. But Jesus, he turned and he said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed.' Then he will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it's dry?" Now 2 others, who were also criminals, were being led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there alongside the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And the soldiers hackled each other, and they cast lots, and they began to divide his clothing. And one of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding Jesus and saying to him, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same condemnation? And indeed, we have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said to Jesus, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus replied, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Now it was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until about 3 in the afternoon, while the sun's light failed and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." And having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, and he said, "Certainly this man was innocent." Our sending hymn are verses 4 and 5 of Our Holy Jesus. I invite you to depart in silence.